TBI cases are particularly challenging, and so I want to give you an overview and my thoughts in regards to doing those cases in a way that sort of combines both the claims aspect with handling the software issues, and we're going to cover that tomorrow in much more detail. But how you combine that with the narrative format to address different issues that pertain to TBI, also addressing in your demand letter some of the most common defenses that you will run into. So I wanted to start out by talking about how do you prepare for the demand. And one of the things that we know from looking at the way that insurance companies have to evaluate cases along the process of the claim is the reserve process. And we were talking about this in one of the prior CLEs this week, and it sounded like a lot of folks weren't real familiar with this. And so I just want you to understand that legally, an insurance company has to be able to have enough money in reserve to pay claims, and they have to transfer that amount of money once the claim occurs. And in order for you to be able to get a reasonable settlement offer, you have to help the insurance company and the adjuster set the reserves appropriately by letting them know from in my opinion, the letter of representation, what the injuries are, and providing them any documentation along the way that would be helpful in having them reset the reserves. Now, I've done a number of interviews on former claims adjusters and supervisors over the years, and I just did one this last week with somebody who had left Progressive after many years. That person told me that in some companies, including hers, they are limited by the amount that they can go up in reserves by only about $5,000 per time. So it's very important right from the beginning that you ensure that the insurance company understands that if you're handling a TBI case, that you are handling a TBI case and what symptoms potentially the person has during your letter of rep. That way they understand. Now, if you have any of these records or if you get these records along the way, I think it behooves you to end up sending these in. Part of the reason why is because each adjuster has a certain amount of authority level, and as the claim becomes worth more, it may get kicked up to different adjusters. And you may have experienced that over the course of your career, that these claims start to move up as the insurer starts to understand that the value is more. So if there's a neuropsych that has findings of TBI, you'd want to send that in before you send in your demand letter. Advanced imaging reports if they're positive, neurology or other specialist reports if positive, endocrinologist if you've got an endocrinology issue involved in the case, narratives regarding extended time loss or loss of employment, because you need to make sure that they're going to set aside enough money for the wage loss economic damage claim. Notice of termination from the employer, again for the same reason, life care plan, VOCA rehab, and economist report. And you want to make sure that you get all these things into the adjuster before you send in your demand letter. Now, that doesn't mean you should be sending in all of the records. You want to make sure that you're picking and choosing. Part of the reason why I suggest that to you is because I want you to send out a single demand letter with all of the records, and this is really important, I'll stress it this weekend, so that the adjuster doesn't make an initial assessment and then get penalized, because they will in some cases at some insurance companies, get penalized for resubmitting a Colossus or a claims outcome advisor / LNAV evaluation. So if they run more than one of those, they can get in trouble, so they don't like to rerun them. So what you want to do is you give them enough records to set their reserves, but you don't give them enough records where they're actually going to run a complete analysis on the case and then have to rerun it and get themselves in trouble. This is also why I suggest pretty strongly that you do not submit the claim for evaluation until the client is done, unless you run into a situation, and Matt will talk about this on Saturday, where you know that you've got a low policy limits and you know that your case is already worth way more than that. That would make sense to maybe submit it early for demand, but otherwise I strongly suggest you don't do that until the client's claim is done.